Wait, imagine making 41 grand and owning a whole house. That sounds like a scam now. And the crazy part is, that was just a normal factory job. Not billionaire, not tech bro, just working guy. Meanwhile today, 41 grand barely negotiates rent. That gap alone tells you the whole vibe changed. But hold on, the economy did get bigger though. So where did all that extra pie go? Apparently not into the average dude's pockets. In the 50s, one salary actually ran the whole house? That alone feels like a different planet. And the wife not working was normal, not some luxury flex. Only a third of women worked then, which is wild. Today, both people work and still feel broke. That's the real insult, honestly. But I get the counterpoint, too. More people can work now. It just doesn't always translate into a better life. Like, congrats, you have options, and none of them are cheap. The post-war setup was just stacked in a weirdly beautiful way. Factories were making consumer goods instead of war stuff. Veterans got mortgage help, suburbs got built, wealth started compounding. That is not the starting line most people get today. Today, you're lucky if the starting line is indoors. Bruh, the bar is in the basement. But then the video hits that bigger question. Was growth shared? Because a bigger economy means nothing if the split is ugly. And it sounds like the split used to be way cleaner. The median, low income, and even the top all moved together for a while. That is the dream version of capitalism, right? Everybody rises, nobody feels completely left behind. Then around 1980, the floor stops moving like the ceiling does. That's the gut punch right there. Median workers flatten out while top earners sprint away. So the graph basically becomes a ladder with one broken rung. And the broken rung is always at the bottom, of course. That's why people feel like the system is rigged. Because it kind of is, at least in the distribution sense. The top captures more of the growth, not just more wealth already existing. That's the difference people miss when they say, economy is up. Up for who exactly? Because apparently the stock chart and the grocery bill do not speak the same language. They are in a toxic relationship. I also keep thinking about social mobility here. The promise was always, work hard, move up, do better than your parents. That promise is what people actually mean by the American dream. And if that cracks, the whole story feels different. The video keeps asking whether you can climb the ladder at all, because if not, then growth is just background noise. But I do think the 50s had a real advantage in optimism. Even if it was uneven, people could still imagine a path. Today the path exists, but it looks like a maze with fees. A maze designed by somebody who hates you personally. And housing is the biggest tell of all. In the 50s, that $84,000 house was manageable. It was basically cheaper than the annual salary. Now even a decent starter home feels like a spiritual challenge. You don't buy a house now, you audition for it. With background checks on your soul. And that's before you even talk about interest rates and down payments. The old system had government stepping in hard, though. Cheap mortgages, suburban construction, veteran support, all that. So it wasn't just the market doing its magic. Shocking news, government did something useful. Yeah, that alone is a plot twist. The deeper point is that policy decided who got to build wealth. And that's what makes this whole comparison feel uncomfortable. Because it wasn't just income, it was a life structure. One era had structure that helped ordinary people accumulate something. The other one feels like you're constantly paying to stand still. But are we being fair to 2025? People live longer. Technology is insane, and access to stuff is broader. So the quality of life answer is not one clean knockout. Right, a 1955 worker didn't have the same consumer universe. No internet, no modern medicine, no insane convenience everywhere. Also, no Amazon packages ruining your finances daily. That's a hidden cost nobody wants to model. But the core debate is still about dignity and security. Can a regular person feel like progress includes them? That is the whole American dream test. And the scary part is, the answer seems weaker now. Not because nobody is rich, but because the middle got squeezed. That's why these old decades feel so romantic in hindsight. Even though, let's be honest, they had plenty of flaws too. Like, it was not some magical egalitarian paradise. History always gets a little prettier on rewind. Still, if one salary could buy stability, that's powerful. Stability changes how people plan, marry, save, and take risks. It changes the emotional weather of a country. And that weather seems way harsher now. So if you had to pick, what actually had it better? The raw material life or the freedom life? Because those are not the same question. I think 1955 had better odds for ordinary security. But 2025 has more freedom and possibility on paper. The tragedy is that possibility does not pay the rent. That line should be on a billboard somewhere. And maybe that's the final answer. Growth happened, but the share broke. So the dream isn't dead, just way more expensive. Which is a very American way to ruin a dream. Damn, that is too accurate. And that's why people keep looking back at the 50s. Not because everything was perfect, but because the latter felt real. If the latter is fake, the whole story gets shaky. And that is the uncomfortable question this data keeps forcing. Okay, now I want to see the 70s and the 90s too, because I bet the plot gets even messier. And honestly, messier is usually where the truth lives. The 70s are where this gets spicy, because the whole vibe starts splitting. Not just rich versus poor, but who actually gets pulled up with growth. Haha, that is the whole scam test right there. If GDP rises and your paycheck does not, something is broken. And that earlier setup was almost weirdly clean, like one factory job could carry a whole family. That alone sounds like another planet now. But then the graph starts showing the middle getting less and less share, right? That is the part people feel before they can prove it. First the vibe dies, then the spreadsheet catches up. Exactly. And the post-war decades had that shared rise built in. Wages, housing, mobility, all moving in the same direction. Which is why everybody keeps romanticizing that era. It was not magic, it was distribution. So when does that distribution break? Around 1980, and then it gets ugly for the median worker. Bruh, that clean split is so violent. You mean top incomes keep flying while everyone else flattens? Pretty much, and that is why the dream starts feeling selective. Haha, selective is such a polite word for that mess. It is capitalism with better branding. Okay, that was annoyingly good. But the housing piece is where it really hits people in the face. Because in the 50s, the house was basically a wealth machine? Exactly. A normal salary could buy a normal home without existential panic. Modern people hear that and think it is folklore. And the government was helping with mortgages, veterans, suburbs, all of it? Yep, and tax policy was also making room for that. Which means the state was not pretending to be neutral. It was actively building middle-class life. That is such a huge difference from today, where people are basically soloing the economy. Haha, soloing the economy is a brutal phrase. But it feels true when rent eats half your income. And the 1950s version had one income supporting a whole household, which made that era feel stable, even if it was not equal for everyone. Right, because we should not pretend everybody was winning in the same way. Black Americans, women, a lot of people were still locked out. So the dream was real, but very incomplete. That actually matters because nostalgia loves to erase the exclusions. Exactly. The question is not was it perfect, it is who got a shot. And later decades seem to widen the shot for some, but not the paycheck. That is such a cursed trade-off. More opportunity, less stability. Enjoy your upgrade. New version installed, less affordable housing. This is basically the operating system of modern America. And the top earners really separate from everybody else over time. Is that just CEOs or broader than that? Broader, but CEOs become the loudest symbol of it. Because nothing says healthy system like executive pay doing parkour. Parkour is actually perfect. Meanwhile, the median worker is just trying not to get flattened. Yeah, and that median line is the one that tells the truth. Because the average can lie if the top is exploding? Totally. Averages get hijacked by the rich. So the American dream became a statistical illusion for a lot of people. For a lot of people, yes, or at least a lot harder to reach. And that mobility question is the deepest one, honestly. Can you beat your parents? Can you climb? Can you actually move up? That is the emotional core, not just the income chart. Because if the answer is no, then effort stops feeling heroic. It starts feeling like a lottery you are told to respect. Respect the lottery is insane, but people still buy into it because the alternative is depressing. So is 2025 actually worse or just more unequal? That is the real knife twist, because some things are clearly better. Like what? Access, technology, safety in some jobs, more rights for more people. But the big life stuff got harder. Housing, childcare, debt, and actually building wealth from zero. So we traded a simpler ladder for a fancier screen. On the screen, you are thriving. Off-screen, your bank account is screaming. And that is why the old decades keep winning the nostalgia war. Not because everyone was freer, but because more people felt economically held. Exactly. The floor was higher. That is such a huge line to lose. Once the floor falls, every setback feels personal and permanent. That changes how a whole country breathes. And maybe that is why people keep asking if the dream is dead. Not dead, but definitely under redesigned ownership. Under redesigned ownership is diabolical. Still, I do not think the answer is simple glorification of 1955. Because that era had dignity for some and exclusion for many? Exactly. And 2025 has more freedom but less security. So neither era is a clean win. That is probably the most honest answer, which is annoying. The most honest answer is always annoying. But if you are the median earner, I think the older decades had the stronger deal. And if you are thinking about rights, access, and who gets included, then today is better in important ways, just not in the economic feeling. So the headline is basically, better life, worse deal. That sounds like a modern America t-shirt. Wait, would you rather be a median worker in 1955 or 2025? If I am being selfish, 1955 for the economics and 2025 for the humanity. That is such a politician answer, but it is annoyingly fair. Yeah, because the real win is a future that keeps both. More growth that actually reaches regular people. And enough policy to make the ladder real again. There it is again, the ladder. If the ladder comes back, the dream does too. But 1955 also had a weirdly clean bargain. One job, one house, one future. Clean for some people, not for everyone if you were black, a woman, or not invited. Fair, the nostalgia gets expensive when you remember who was excluded. Still, for the typical white middle-class worker, the math looked almost absurdly good. Exactly. Wages rose with productivity, so the pie got bigger and your slice grew too. That is the part that hurts now. because the pie is gigantic and the slice feels suspiciously thin. Suspiciously thin is the most polite way to describe modern rent. Rent today acts like it has a private equity fund behind it. Bro, 1955 rent was basically a monthly handshake. And the house itself was not some unattainable fantasy either. Right. The home price was often close to annual income, which is almost alien now. Almost alien is generous. Now it is like 7 years of your soul. And the mortgage help mattered because policy was actively pushing ownership. That is the key difference. The system was building middle-class wealth on purpose. Do you think people overrate the idea that hard work alone used to be enough? I think hard work mattered, but it was riding on a much friendlier machine. That is such a good line, because now the machine is eating the worker. And the top end kept capturing more of the gains after around 1980. So growth did not disappear, it just stopped behaving like shared prosperity. Yeah, that is the tragedy, because the dream was not just money. It was the sense that your kid could do better than you did. And that is exactly why the intergenerational part hits so hard. If upward mobility stalls, the whole story starts sounding fake. A national slogan becomes a subscription you keep forgetting to cancel. That is insane, but annoyingly accurate. So maybe 1955 had the better deal on economics, and 2025 has the better deal on dignity. The real question is whether we can ever make both true at once. That would actually be the dream worth defending. And not the fake version people sell with stock photos and slogans. Exactly. Give me the boring reality where wages rise and housing is sane. Honestly, that would feel radical now.